Mr. Speaker, 40 years ago, I was an intern and resident at Parkland Hospital in Dallas. Any intern or resident will tell you the month of July is significant in the life of an intern or resident. You were last week's medical student and you're this week's intern managing the emergency room, or you were last year's intern, you're this week's house officer managing perhaps a busy practice, perhaps a busy emergency room. As such, every intern and resident remembers the end of that first week of their internship or residency. It's just something that you do. You got through the first week of what was a very trying time. So I remember well July the 7th of my internship, July 7th of my residency. Well, Mr. Speaker, in 2016, July 7th also took on additional significance in Dallas, Texas. 5 police officers were killed and 9 more were injured during a shooting in downtown Dallas. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, area hospitals sprang into action and activated their disaster plans. I'm proud to say the staff at Parkland Hospital, the staff at Baylor University Hospital, and other medical professionals provided excellent emergency care to the victims of the attack. Mr. Speaker, it is critical that we have people who are able to respond when called. Now, additionally, I've long believed that the American military is the arsenal of democracy and that it is critical for upholding freedom in the world. Each member of the United States Armed Forces has an important role in a collective team effort. This is especially true in a combat zone where trauma surgeons are some of the most crucial members of the armed forces. These medical professionals are trained to save the lives of soldiers who sustain traumatic injuries on the battlefield, and they are some of the best in the business. However, as wars wind down and our soldiers come home, the experience that military trauma surgeons have gained overseas may be diminished or lost unless these surgeons continue to train and to prepare for their next possible deployment. To let this expertise and skill drift away would be a significant loss to trauma patients, both at home and abroad. Trauma, Mr. Speaker, is not limited to the battlefields and active conflicts. Unfortunately, no community is immune from the threat of traumatic injury, and community doctors must be prepared to give life-saving care to trauma victims. However, there is a way that we can ensure trained combat surgeon skills are utilized to help American patients here in the homeland who need it. The Mission Zero Act seeks to connect American patients with battle-tested trauma care through the craft of military trauma care providers. The bill provides grants to allow military trauma care providers and teams to offer care in our nation's leading trauma centers and systems. Here's the bottom line. The Mission Zero Act is a win for both civilian patients and military trauma doctors. Mr. Speaker, I am grateful that this bipartisan legislation has finally come to the floor. Along with my fellow Texan, Mr. Gene Green, I introduced this bill in 2016 following that particularly traumatic incident that struck so close to home. Texas is not unique in its need for this expertise. Over the last few months alone, our nation has witnessed a need for trauma care hospitals across the country. One such incident was the Amtrak derailment near DuPont, Washington on December 18, 2017. That incident resulted in 3 passenger fatalities and 70 injuries over a busy freeway. As we've seen, having access to experienced trauma care can become the difference between life and death for a critically injured patient. There is no doubt that integrating military physicians into the trauma and disaster system is beneficial not only for American patients, but also for American soldiers. I'm encouraged by the bipartisan effort to support both our servicemen and our nation's trauma system, and I thank the co-sponsors from both sides of the dais for their support of this important legislation. Quite simply, the Mission Zero Act is common sense, and I urge members to join me in supporting this life-saving legislation. I'll reserve the